What's up, guys? My name is Leif Farneson, and you're listening to episode 44 of the Vegan Gym Podcast. My brother and I are vegan fitness coaches and bodybuilders who started this podcast as part of our mission to show the world that vegans are strong, healthy, compassionate badasses who are leading the charge against chronic disease, animal abuse, and climate change. We've had the opportunity to help thousands of vegans reach their fitness goals, but we're just getting started. Our goal is to help 1 million vegans get into the best shape of their lives. So if you believe in challenging the status quo and showing the world how badass veganism really is, then this podcast is for you. With that, I'd like to introduce my brother, my co-host for this podcast, Anders. What's going on, man?
Yo, what is going on, guys? This week is a very special podcast. This is something that I was able to go travel down to a past client of ours and to interview her about her journey that she has gone through in her life. And she's able to say that she's lost over 200 pounds right now. And we are just so fortunate that we had the opportunity to be a part of that journey. And so that's what this podcast is all about. She's going to be talking about that. So hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope it touches your heart in some way. I just want to say thank you for joining me, Molly. And well, how does it feel to be on your first podcast?
I mean, it's an experience. It's definitely You can't prepare for it, but
right.
I'm very honored that you guys invited me to be on this and share my story, because
of course,
when you're doing something, it doesn't feel like a big deal sometimes, and
right.
then but when other people are kind of there saying like, no, like what you've actually done is amazing, it kind of starts to sink in, and you actually start to have that self-appreciation for what you've done.
Well, and especially for you, since this has been like a few years of a journey, you know, it's like it's hard to really wrap your head around exactly what you went through, you know. It's because you're going day by day, you're trying to figure things out, and you're just looking forward and rather not backwards, and kind of especially with someone in your shoes, like you don't really want to look backwards and to reminisce about like what you went through, because it was a difficult journey. And I'm sure that you can agree with that.
Yeah.
But the really cool thing is like you've gotten yourself to this point, and that's essentially what I want to be talking about is your journey, because I know for a fact so many people are going to resonate with this. So many people, you're going to touch people, and it's going to make them take some sort of action so they can get to where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the coolest thing ever, because like we've talked about many, many times, you teach by experience and not books.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you can agree with that.
Definitely.
So where I really want to start off is, let's see here, looking at the questions that we have laid out. What part of your transformation are you most proud of?
I think the biggest change is actually being able to, on some level, accept myself now. So my body's always going to bear scars of my life, of being overweight, of being obese. They're always going to have stretch marks. There's always going to be a little bit of excess skin, but I've come from a place of just ignoring those and just feeling like they were preventing me from living my life or even socializing or wearing something, to the point where I can accept them and realize that they're not what defines me. And by being able to connect to them and accept them and accept myself where I am, I'm able to actually meet people where they are. Because if you're pretending to be something you're not, when I was trying to pretend like my body was perfect, or that I hadn't reached the level of perfection, I wasn't able to help people because I was so worried about being perfect. But people can't relate to you if you're perfect.
It's so true. It's like we all have imperfections.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of showing others so they understand that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it, like, did you ever think that you were going to be at this point?
Oh, no.
Feeling like self-acceptance?
Definitely not. I was so detached from everything, and the way I felt about the looking in the mirror, I didn't look in the mirror because I didn't want to see what was there. I didn't want to accept what was there. So especially at my heaviest, when I looked in the mirror, I had really no idea how heavy I actually was. That wasn't what I saw. I saw myself when I was at the time in the best shape. I still saw myself as 18-year-old high school senior when I was doing track and volleyball and working, and that's still what I saw. And I couldn't even accept where I was then. And so now to be able to start moving forward, and not only, it's less about seeing where I am now and more of working towards understanding where I was, accepting where I was, and accepting that that was part of my life instead of trying to ignore it and pretend like it didn't happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Wow. So you would look in the mirror and you would envision yourself as when you were fit.
Yeah.
And so what kind of, that's interesting because that's not what I would think that someone in that situation would do. What is kind of like, is that kind of denial or?
It's complete denial.
Okay.
It's complete denial because when I moved to Florida, it was when I had the biggest weight gain. I gained, I think, 80 pounds in like less than a year when I moved to Florida, because when I moved here, I kind of gave up everything. I grew up in the same small town. I had all the same friends. So when I came here, I started over and I didn't really know how to do that. So I sought comfort the only way I knew how, which was through food. And it wasn't like I went overnight 80 pounds, like within the span of a year is a very short time to gain 80 pounds. Right. But it still wasn't like I went to bed on Tuesday and woke up on Wednesday and my clothes didn't fit. It's the frog in the pot where it doesn't realize it's boiling alive. Just all of a sudden one day I have to buy bigger clothes and my clothes don't fit. And all of a sudden I can't fit into double XLs. And I don't know, well, I don't think you've ever gone to a store and not been able to buy any clothes there.
Yeah.
And not knowing what to do. Like I needed work uniforms and I couldn't buy work uniforms at a normal store. I had to drive. Now there are stores in the areas for plus size, but I actually had to drive 2 hours out of the way.
Wow.
In order to get clothes to wear to work, or risk buying something off of Amazon and not knowing if it would fit. Yeah. And I'm in denial, so I'm ordering sizes that probably aren't going to fit because I don't want to admit to myself that I wear the size that I wear. So then you get them and they don't fit, and instead of sending them back, you just deal with it because you just don't want to admit it. It's complete denial. It's complete unacceptance of where you are.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. So let's kind of like back it up a little bit and talk about how you got to that point. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of how you were able to, and I mean this in a nice way, like how you were able to get yourself to that 350 pounds. So it was something that we've talked about on our coaching calls and stuff. You posted, I think you posted it in Facebook too, but you talked about how much do you currently weigh right now?
Right now, I'm like 153 right now,
okay.
Actually. So I put on a couple pounds, but it's just literally because I've been transitioning and trying out different diets.
You recently just tried raw vegan. So first off, how was that experience?
You know what? It was actually kind of spectacular. You wake up and you feel like, I've been an avid coffee drinker. We've talked about that. Yeah. And I gave up coffee when I was doing this, and I would wake up and I just felt very energized, and you feel very connected to everything. It's hard to describe, and it sounds a little crazy like when I go off on it, but it just is. You go outside and the wind feels different, the sun feels different, and you can tell your energy levels are so up. It's just so much easier to be positive, but on the other side you are very open to other energies as well. So there's also like spikes where you all of a sudden you're like, I'm upset and I don't know why. And it could be because somebody else is around you is upset. You're just much more open to everything.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate transitioning to veganism. Like that I felt that when I transitioned to veganism.
It's like that transition times like 10.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's amazing. Like I think anybody should try to do it for at least 2 weeks. You realize that cooked food is a complete drug.
Yeah.
You don't realize it until you don't eat it. But it wasn't a good experience, and it's definitely time.
I'll back you up because everything you've suggested for me to try has been phenomenal.
It's
So
gone well.
if you're listening and you're thinking about trying raw veganism for 2 weeks, try it because Molly said so.
Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
But kind of getting back into it, yeah, you told me that since you're 153, you haven't been this light since when in your life?
So the last time I weighed 150 pounds was 4th or 5th grade.
Wow.
So that is 10, 11 years old.
What did that feel like when you got back to this point?
Oh, there was a lot of crying when it happened, and
I'm
it
sure.
wasn't like sad tear. It was just like this jubilation that kind of washed over me, just complete pure joy of just realizing I'd done something that I never thought I could do. And I never had anybody who told me like I couldn't lose weight or anything like that, or I had certain doctors and certain members of my family who said like that's just the way we're built, and genetically like that's how things would always be for me, that I would always be big. So there was some of that, but I didn't have anybody specifically telling me I couldn't do it. But I had myself telling myself that I could never get there. 170 seemed like a pipe dream when I first started losing weight. And that was just to be on the low end of like just overweight instead of obese for my height.
Yeah.
So to reach 150, to remember specifically the last time you weighed 150 because you were embarrassed and you didn't want your classmates to know that you were 150 pounds at 10 years old. And then just to be there as an adult and know that it's a healthy weight and it's a healthy space. It was magical. Like,
that's so awesome.
Yeah.
You've created such an awesome image for yourself, and I'm so pumped. You are such a beautiful individual, Molly.
Thank you.
So was that the point in your life where you realized that you had a problem with your weight?
No. So actually the first time, and it took some work looking back to actually pinpoint the moment. But it was when I was 8 years old. I was in 3rd grade, and I remember it very in detail. I mean, I know memory is kind of tricky, but I'd gone shopping the night before with my mom, and I'd gotten this hot pink shirt, and I was super excited about it. And I was wearing an adult size medium, and I thought that made me more grown up because I was wearing adult clothes. Nobody else I knew was wearing adult clothes, so I must be more grown up. And when you're a kid, that's what you go to. You kind of naturally go to that positive state. So this is also the first time that somebody else cast a perception on me that I accepted. Because I was at lunch, I was telling my friends, I even remember the friends' names, it was Ashley and Elizabeth, and I was telling them, I'm wearing an adult size medium. And
like bragging
because I thought it was like so cool, and I'll never forget. And she meant it completely from a good supportive place, but she didn't understand that she had like basically broken the glass on my world, shattered my world. Was Elizabeth goes, no matter what you do, don't ever let anybody make fun of you because of your size.
Wow.
Or something to that extent. I don't know if that's exactly what she said, but it was something around there.
Yeah. What was the first thought that came to you when you heard that?
It's just it's not really so much of a thought as a feeling. Like when things are going really well and then all of a sudden something comes in.
Feels like the world's crashing down on you.
And it's just that heart sinking where you just literally feel like you've gone from here and your heart's just gone whoosh, and like all the air is sucked out of you. That's exactly how it felt. And so, I kind of had gone from this place of being really high up and thinking I was, something special because of this. And then realizing like there might actually, like, it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah.
And at 8, you don't know how to fix that. You don't know how to change that perception.
Yeah.
There's just not really anything you can do about it at 8 years old.
Right.
So.
Well, and that kind of goes along with another conversation we had is like at leading up to that age, like you don't know what is quote unquote healthy unless you hear it from like adults or someone older like explaining it to you or saying this is what you should be eating, that's what you should be eating. So there I'm assuming there must have been some disconnect there.
Yeah. So first of all, I think, and this is completely off that I don't even know that we've talked about, I think it's atrocious that our education system doesn't teach any sort of nutrition.
I'm 100% with you.
It's completely horrible,
Yeah.
and what we feed in school lunches, what I ate in school lunches was horrible, and nobody should be eating that,
Right.
and that it's not taught. But beyond that, you know, my parents were raised by survivors of the Depression. And what I found consistent with people who had parents from survivors of the Depression, food is basically how you express love because they didn't have it. So when they had it, you shared it, you
Right.
gave it. It's how you connect. It's how you bond. That's still how we connect and bond with each other. We go out and we get a meal together. So you respond to love with food. And so my parents are raised by parents of the Depression. They're used to food. One, when you have food, you eat the food. You don't let it go to waste. And you express your love through food. So my parents very much love me and very much live by that lifestyle. And when my parents became adults, they both went straight into the Army where they were given their food on a daily basis. They weren't taught about food. They were just like, they were healthy because like the military, well, I mean, however healthy military rations are.
Well, it's not healthy at all.
It's not healthy, but you know.
It's the cheapest of the cheap.
It's like they didn't learn about it then. And it's not like now where if I'm questioning an ingredient, I can look it up on Wikipedia. You know, they did what they thought was best. But the way marketing is, the way packaging is,
Right.
you know, it's so easy to be misled. So we were under the impression that if we got the vegetable Stouffer's lasagna instead of the meat Stouffer's lasagna, we were making a healthier decision.
Right.
When in all actuality, it's more of the same thing. There's just no way for them to know. So the lack of education, the lack of information about health, and just the marketing scheme, I don't even know what word I want to describe it besides just...
It's just fraud.
That's
what it is.
It really is. It's like, let's put this in a green package with some leaves on it, and then it's healthy.
Yeah.
And it's just so misleading and horrible. There's just no way for them to have known better.
Yeah,
So
it's driven by profit, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
So the lack of information, the lack of knowing what's healthy and what's not, kind of led you to that moment at lunch where your friend said like, "Don't let anyone get to you for your size."
trying to build my confidence
And
instead
so
of destroying it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that kind of, like you said, broke the glass. And so I really want to know, like, how did you go from that feeling of like heart being sunken to eventually getting up to 350 pounds, and kind of like, and I don't want to say journey, but I want to just say like how did that kind of come about?
And it wasn't an overnight thing. So I actually I got healthier in high school because I started getting active, and my parents did take me to a couple of military nutritionists. So I was like towards a healthier weight, and well, I mean, I was always over 200 pounds in high school, but like I felt good about my body and I felt more comfortable in my skin. But then the emotional anxiety started to come in once I graduated high school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And, emotional binge eating is a very real thing that I think everybody does it.
Yeah.
You know, to some extent or another, we've all gotten to that point where we're just eating and we don't realize what we just ate or why. But
I don't know. I can completely agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, And it's just more so for some people than others, but I think everyone does experience it from time to time, especially for like me after bodybuilding shows.
Yeah.
You know, I've been depriving myself, and I just can't stop afterwards.
Yeah.
That's real. So that's kind of something that did you have that as a child, or did that come about in high school, or?
I think I remember having it like as a kid because when you're overweight to the extent that I was, because like I wasn't just like carrying around a few extra pounds. Like even as a child, I was carrying around like 50 to 80 to 100 extra pounds. It was never like I was just a little bit overweight.
Yeah.
You're not comfortable. You don't really want to go out with friends. Like I didn't want to go shopping with any of my friends at the mall because I couldn't shop in the stores they shopped in. I didn't want to go out camping with them because I couldn't keep up with them physically. So I spent a lot of time at home.
Yeah.
And I was at home bored. I grew up in middle of nowhere, Arizona, which I mean, it was a great place to grow up. Don't get me wrong. I loved my childhood, but there wasn't anything to do. And I mean, I used to like melt cheese and eat it. Like it was just, and it's not something my parents could control. They weren't around. It was just it was my coping mechanism for not really having friends or not really having anybody there to really learn and grow and do all those kid things with.
Right.
So it was always there. And I think especially when I started getting older, I think when I moved out and lived by myself for the first time was really, which I did right when I graduated from high school. That was really where it started to take a really big strike because there's nobody there to judge or question what I eat.
Right.
And even when I would think, okay, like I need to start getting healthier, all that stuff, when I would fall off the wagon, I used to flaming hot Cheetos. That was my thing. And I would do the whole, I'm not going to buy any. So then I would buy it, but instead of just eating part of it and being done and putting it away, I was like, well, I don't want to eat this again tomorrow. So I would sit down and eat the whole bag because in my head, and this still happens sometimes. You're
saving yourself.
Yeah, I'm saving myself by eating it all right now because then tomorrow I won't do it.
Yeah.
I won't have it to eat. It won't be there to tempt me. But in all actuality, I have a car and it's not that hard to go to a store. Right. And so that never prevented me. And it was the frog in the hot pot. It just slowly built up. You don't want to admit where you are. You don't want to admit that you're the size that you're at. And so
it just kind of like compounded on itself.
Yeah.
Was there any, that's interesting. Was there any like emotional, besides like dealing with your self-image and stuff like that, were there any external factors that led you to kind of increase the rate of binge eating, or?
So, I mean, I had a highly stressful job for years. I worked in corporate retail management. I did that I was in retail for 13 years and I was in management, I think for 7 or 9, somewhere in that range, of those years. And so you have this job where you're under constant pressure to meet these demands that honestly can't be met. And not only do you need to meet these demands, you have 20, 25 people working for you that you're holding to these demands. And you have to really become a person you don't want to be in those situations.
You have to be the bad guy.
You have to be the bad guy, and just the way things are pushed and the way you have to push people is not always good. And then if somebody can't make their quota or whatever it is, there's no compassion in retail. It's literally, you're told it doesn't matter what the situation is, you need to hold everybody accountable on the same level. Well, that's ridiculous.
Right.
And that's across board retail. That's not just from where I worked. It's across the board retail.
Is that something that you moved into like right after you moved out of your parents' house?
I actually started working in retail at 16. So it started as just a job over Christmas because I was a junior lifeguard when I was 14 and I did a little bit of babysitting, but like I wanted to get a job. So I started at 16 just as a seasonal hire, and then was, I was good at retail. It's,
Yeah.
That's not really something you want to brag about. But I did a good job. I stayed on, and it just kind of went from being a job to something I thought was going to be my career. And it kind of took all of my focus. And so not only was I completely disconnected from who I was seeing in the mirror, I was also disconnected completely from the person I was becoming emotionally and just towards other people.
Yeah.
Like I was not a good person. And I don't mean I was out there doing anything horrifically evil. I
Right.
wasn't like punching puppies or anything. Like I just,
Right.
but I wasn't a good person. I didn't have any really strong moral standing or anything that I really stood myself to or said like, this is my line. I just
Right.
did what I was supposed to do.
And you disconnected, so you couldn't ever connect
Yeah.
to people.
So if you're completely disconnected from your emotions and then one manages to break through, the only thing you can do is try to squash it out, because if you start feeding into that emotion, you have to accept all the other ones, all the loneliness. Loneliness was probably like the biggest factor. I just always felt so alone.
Yeah.
And when you're overweight the way I was, occasionally I would have kids make fun of me, like occasionally, but nobody ever really made fun of me. The worst part is that nobody ever looked at me. So I would be out in public. So now when I walk down a street, I smile at people. They smile back. They wave. They say hello. And I get that part of that is my personality and how it's changed. But a big part of that as well is because of how I look now. When you're overweight like that, nobody wants to look at you because they don't. It's such a problem that we've ignored in our society, because like, you can't point it out because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And no, you should never hurt anybody's feelings. And yes, you should love yourself wherever you're at, because you're there for a reason and you can work to be where you need to be. But at the same time, ignoring it and pretending like you can be carrying around an extra 200 pounds and be healthy is a horrible, horrible thing that we've started promoting in this country. And I'm not against like having plus size models. I'm not against any of those things, but I am against saying that, oh, I'm healthy enough. Like, your health is going to catch up to you.
Right.
And maybe your blood work, maybe everything's fine now, but you can't really believe in 10 years that everything's going to be fine.
Right.
And that was not to kind of skip ahead, but that was like my aha moment, was my parents started having health issues. My dad's a type 2 diabetic, high blood pressure. My mom was just having some health issues. And I remember sitting at dinner with them, and they were talking about they didn't understand like where these things were coming from, because all of their blood work, everything had always been fine. And now all of a sudden nothing was okay, but they'd always been fine. They'd just always been a little bit heavier. And I had just gotten my blood work done for my annual physical, and my doctor had told me, listen, like you're starting to go on the higher sides of things, but like I was still healthy and everything, triglycerides, all of that stuff, cholesterol, I was all within healthy levels. Yeah. But they told me I needed to lose weight, and I just remember leaving there thinking, who the fuck are you?
Who are you?
To tell me I need to lose weight? Like, I'm perfectly healthy. You even just said my blood work's good. And just being so mad because how dare they tell me I need to change something about my body.
Right.
When I have perfect health. And that's when I realized I have perfect health right now. But what about 30 years from now? Where am I going to be? Because again, my parents had been a little bit heavy before. I was 350 pounds.
Right.
So what is that actually going to do to me? And more than that, eventually wanting a family, what is that going to do to, this possibility of that future family? And is that future family even a possibility where I am right now?
All these red flags start coming up.
Yeah. So all of a sudden I am actually thinking, and I'm actually looking into things, and I'm actually starting to question things. And The biggest thing that I can tell anybody is that I didn't go from 350 pounds to trying to be raw vegan for a month overnight. It was 5 years.
Right.
It was 5 years. I lost the first 80 to 100 pounds by going for walks and only eating at McDonald's one time a week. Those were the major lifestyle changes
Right.
I made in the beginning.
Which that's all you need to get started.
And it was nothing. And it was so, I will never forget. The first thing I tried to do was run a 5K. And I downloaded the Couch to 5K app. And the first workout in that is run 30 seconds, walk for a minute. And I couldn't run for 10 seconds. I couldn't. I could not do one sit-up. I couldn't. And when I started, that's where a lot of people lose hope. And that's where you just have to stick through it. And as hard as it is and as much as it sucks, you have to tell yourself it's going to get better and just realize that's not where you want to be and you won't be there forever. Because the first time I did sit-ups with my roommate, who was she was in decent shape. So she's able to, knock out, 10, 20, whatever sit-ups. And I'm here struggling to do 3, having to grab onto my legs and pull my body up.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and you're so filled with shame. And then trying to run and being able to run for 5 seconds when she's running a mile, I just wanted to give up. I didn't want to keep going, and I can't really say exactly what it was that made me keep going. I don't.
That was going to be my next question. It's like your parents were the kind of the turning point. You're seeing like these health issues, and you didn't want to get down there. But I know from my own journey is once you start doing the things, it gets so incredibly difficult to stay consistent with things. So that was my next question is like, what ultimately, like, how did you keep going? And I know that you hit roadblocks, and I want people to understand, like, you're going to be hitting roadblocks.
I think for 2 years, we were talking about this earlier, for 2 years, I weighed 200 pounds for 2 years. I didn't ever think I'd get over the 200 pound hump. I seriously thought I was just going to weigh 200 pounds for the rest of my life. That was a thought for a long time. So you hit a lot of roadblocks. But I honestly think the thing that kept me going, especially in the beginning, is because you really do start to feel better, and you need to cling to those tiny moments where you feel better.
Yeah.
Because
what were those moments for you?
The first time I actually finished that first Couch to 5K workout, where I did the whole workout.
That's so awesome.
Every time I was supposed to run for 30 seconds, I ran for 30 seconds. Every time I walked for a minute, I walked for a minute. Every time I was supposed to run again, I started running again. And I thought I was going to die because in Florida, it's like August, I think, when I was doing this. So it's also the worst time of year to be trying to run. But I had been trying so hard. And the first time I completed that workout, I really remember jumping up and down in the street with my arms up. I'm sure my neighbors thought I was a crazy person because I am cheering in the street. But that is
crazy awesome.
Yeah. But that is the thing, is you can't compare where you are to where anybody else is. And every time you make a small accomplishment, you have to become a cheerleader for yourself. Or if you can't be a cheerleader for yourself, find somebody who can be a cheerleader for you. Because every time you pick up that apple instead of a cupcake, you need to give yourself, I call it a little head party. I tell it to all my clients all the time, is you need to throw a party in your head. Yeah. Because what it does is right now, eating that cupcake sends off endorphins in your brain. And so your brain's like, yes, this is what I want to be doing to feel better. But when you start to change that thinking, when you pick up in the few times you do it, you're going to feel so dumb. You're going to feel so dumb and what am I doing? Why did I listen to this crazy lady? But what starts to happen is you reach for the apple every time, because now your brain gets those same endorphins from eating the apple that it does from the cupcake.
Makes perfect sense.
But you can actually be happy about it because you're not just getting temporary pleasure. You're actually doing something that's good for your body and helping your body. And stop being afraid of fruit, people. Like, it is not those sugars from fruit. It's not the sugars from fruit that are making people go type 2 diabetic. Like, stop being afraid of fruit. Stop being afraid of, like, yes, what you put in your salad matters, but the more greens you get in your diet, the better. But just using that. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent.
Well, people look at they really narrow it down to like one little thing where they should just be taking something small off their list instead of like looking at it as a whole and be like, well, this is bad, this is bad. Eliminate one, you're going to get progress. Then eliminate another, you're going to make more progress.
Exactly, and that's the thing too is it's you don't necessarily want to go from one extreme to the other, right? Because one, you probably aren't going to stick with it long term, and two, it really does become about the journey that you're making to get there. And I think a lot of people feel like when they commit to something, because especially what I found is people who are interested in vegan and trying, like, there's actually a huge movement out there to call it now plant-based, to basically rebrand veganism, because everybody goes vegan for different reasons. And you can go vegan, you can be vegan, and in the beginning, if you're not perfect, that's fine. It's not about nailing it perfectly on the first go. It's about making those strives better. So, like, let's say you start with only eating, meat or eggs or dairy for one meal a day. Just start small. And I promise you're going to start feeling better. Yeah. And the more you feel better, the more you're going to make those positive decisions. But you have to give it time. In the beginning, you will feel worse. It's the detoxing process where your body's all of a sudden, it's going to crave. You have to learn the difference between hunger and cravings. And so when you're ready to eat and you look at a banana and you're like, I could smash that, then you're hungry. When you're like, man, I could really go for a burger from such and such place with the extra sauce, blah, 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 that's a craving. That's your body being uncomfortable because it had something it shouldn't have had. And rather than trying to purge that out of your system, your body just wants more of it because then it doesn't have to deal with that. Our mind wants to protect us from everything. That's why we want to quit when we're working out. That's why we want to quit when it's hard. That's why we don't want to take risk in relationships or in business, because our body, our mind wants us to be comfortable. It wants us to be safe. Our mind's job is to make sure we survive.
Exactly.
But you're not supposed to just survive. You're supposed to live. You're supposed to try things. And just don't be afraid just because you're saying like, hey, I'm going to go vegan, or hey, I'm going to go plant-based. Don't let anybody else dictate to you what that means. When I first went vegetarian, I ate meat on the weekends. And I did that up until I went vegan. And the reasons I went vegan were very much a moral issue. So as soon as I went vegan, I did go vegan. But that's not how everybody comes to it. So I'd rather have somebody trying to be vegan or trying to be plant-based and eating that way 80% of the time than somebody saying, oh, well, I can't do it 100% of the time. I'm not even going to try.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Just put your toes in the water and then get a feel for it. Then dive in.
Like, come on. Like, if you're eating it most of the time and then you eat sushi one night, like, don't beat yourself up about it. And that's really the hardest thing is when you do mess up, when you do make a mistake with your diet, or you skip a workout, or you half-ass it, whatever it is, don't just shrug it off. Like, there's two things you don't want to do. One, you don't want to just shrug it off and pretend like it's no big deal, because then you're going to just keep shrugging it off, and then all of a sudden, frog in the pot, you're 350 pounds and you don't know how you got there. But to the other end, you do not want to rip yourself a new one. You do not want to tear yourself down to the baseboards every time you make a mistake, which I did for a very long time. You need to recognize that you made a mistake. You need to recognize that it was there. Acknowledge it is really the better word. You need to acknowledge that you made a mistake. We're humans and we do it.
Right.
animals, everything makes mistakes. It's not like it's a, like, like deer don't perform perfectly every time. They fall down all the time. There's tons of stuff out there.
Right.
So acknowledge that you made a mistake. Recognize what the patterns are there. Look back. What led me to get here? So I just binged, and this happened last week. It's nothing to me last week. I've been doing this for 5 years. It happened last week where I was just coming off of raw foods. I ate my first cooked meal. It was like crack. And
Right.
I just wanted to eat more and more. And so it started with, and again, it's not like I was making horrifically bad food decisions, but eventually it got to a day where everything that I wanted to eat that day, I ate all of those things. And by the end of the day, one, I felt sick because I'd eaten too much. The next day, I felt so heavy. It was hard for me to get up in the morning. And I just woke up and I just was ripping myself a new one. I'm like, you've been working so hard. You did this. You've just undone everything you've done. How do you even, now you have to start all over from scratch? No, stop. You made a mistake. What led me to make those mistakes? Okay, well, I was trying to do a lot of deep emotional work in order to prepare for this podcast. I'm going through a lot of different changes at work. I'm still in a very new world for myself where I've gone from, having the stability of that regular paycheck, health benefits to, if I want to make money, I have to go after it. I don't really have that. So it's just acknowledging that there was a lot of stress factors that were building up, and rather than, reaching out and calling somebody or telling somebody I was going through a hard time, I was just trying to deal with it on my own.
Yeah.
And dealing with that, all of those emotions came in, and eating something made me feel good. And I was at a point where I wasn't feeling super bad, but I did feel a lot better when I ate something that I probably shouldn't have been eating. And I just gave into it. And so next time I know when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed like that, I need to reach out. I need to call people. There's always somebody you can call. There's always somebody you can reach out to, that you can at least talk to about one thing that's going on in your life. And if I had done that, then maybe I would have avoided that day and that day wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So after you recognize what the patterns are, you've acknowledged that there was a problem, you recognize what the patterns are, you've made a plan for how to try to avoid it in the future. And once that's done, just forgive yourself. Yeah. Just let it go, because...
And get back up on the saddle.
When animals make a mistake, they suffer the consequence of it, and it's over. They don't, you don't see your dog dwelling on the fact that he ate your slipper for very long. Like, he doesn't care. Humans are very different. We beat ourselves up for the same mistake over and over and over again. Right. And if we stop beating ourselves up, usually there's somebody in our life who can bring it up and beat us up for it. And that's not justice. Justice is you do something, you fuck up, you pay the price. That's justice.
Right.
You don't need to keep reliving it, because your body doesn't understand that you're not going back through it. So every time you beat yourself up for overeating, your body just recognizes those patterns happening again, and it literally will prevent you from losing weight. It will make you stand still.
Yeah.
So
wow. I loved all of that. I love just sitting back here and listening to all of that.
Like, when I start talking, like, you notice I'm like Molly's way taller in my chair now.
Molly's like, I'm taking the reins. I got this. But no, that's very valuable. And I think, like, explaining it in that way, like your point of view and how to overcome certain things that everyone has issues with from time to time, like binge eating and stuff like that, and coming out of it and having like a plan of action, and then looking back and seeing like what could have been done differently is so incredibly important, because most people, like you said, they just beat themselves up about it. So I think that's super cool. I want to ask you, like, kind of going back to when you first started your journey of losing weight 5 years ago, how, if it was at all, how hard was it to commit to yourself to making that change?
Oh my God.
Like how were you able to get yourself to that first workout?
So in the beginning, it was just knowing that there needed to be change. and not knowing what that change needed to be, but knowing that it needed to be there.
Yeah.
I didn't really, like, now, you know, I set goals, I write them down, I make timelines, all of that great stuff. In the beginning, it was just trying to figure something out, because I had finally accepted where I was. And so that's where it really starts. As hard as it is, you have to really accept where you are, because you can't grow if you still think you're 18 and 200 pounds when you're 351 pounds. If you're still looking in the mirror and thinking, like, I'm fine. And I mean, it was even to the level, like, I remember watching The Biggest Loser and being like, all those people weigh less than me, but they're way fatter than I am. I remember thinking that. And I'm like, no, like, I just had a complete morphed perception about where I was at. And so, the beginning, it was just about trying to make something different, trying to be a little bit different.
Kind of like finding yourself.
Yeah.
That's so powerful, though. You know, it's so many. Everyone is on their journey to find their self, and you knew that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you knew that there was more to your life. You knew that you wanted to be someone else.
And I think, honestly, I think a big part, like, now that we're talking about it and thinking about it, I think a big part of that too was the fact that I lived with someone else who, she was going out and living her life, you know, and kind of being jealous of that.
Yeah.
Kind of being jealous of the fact that she could go out, we could go out to bars and she could talk to people. I couldn't talk to people. You know, I say people didn't see me because they didn't want to see me, but at the same time, I didn't want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody did talk to me, I didn't know what to do, because how could anybody want to talk to me or have anything to do with me? I didn't want to talk to or have anything to do with myself.
And this all goes through your head in those situations.
Every time you don't even realize it's happening.
Right.
You don't even realize it's happening. You're in a room full of crowded people, and your worst nightmare is that you keep sitting there alone. But even scarier than that, even worse than that, is if somebody actually talks to you, because then you have to admit to being that person. You have to admit that you're the one in that body. And so it was a lot of disconnect. It was a lot of denial. It was a lot of just spending so much time convincing myself that nothing was wrong, and doing everything I could to just pretend like it was normal, when there was nothing normal.
Yeah.
And it's things you don't even realize unless you're in that position. Going to restaurants and not fitting in a booth. That's not something people worry about. That's something that I worried about constantly. When I went out with friends, I made sure to get there first so we could get a table.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to be embarrassed and not be able to fit in the booth. And going to theme parks with people and not being able, pretending like you're scared of roller coasters because I love roller coasters. I love them. I love that adrenaline rush. But I pretended like I didn't really like them because I knew I couldn't fit into the seats.
So you ultimately just pretended to be someone that you weren't.
But I wasn't. I just really wasn't. And I remember the one time I did try to go on a roller coaster and I didn't fit in the seat, and that just reinforced that that was not the person I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be a person who liked roller coasters, because if I was, I would fit in a roller coaster.
Right.
And then it's society's fault for not making roller coasters big enough, you know, or it's somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. You can always blame somebody else. But at the end of the day, like, I was old enough to understand that I was eating crap. I had enough resources. There's a lot of information out there, and it can be very overwhelming. But at the same time, there's a lot of information out there. And if you're trying anything different from what you're doing, it's probably a healthier step in the beginning.
Right.
And that's the thing, is a lot of people, even with me, I didn't start for so long because I'm like, oh, like there's just so much information. I just don't know which one to do. So I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. That's bullshit. So
you have the reason of being overwhelmed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, and some of the biggest advice I can give is, similar to, if you're trying to go vegan or you're trying to go vegetarian, don't feel like you have to nail it perfectly on the first try. Don't feel like you need to try to go vegan, build a workout routine, and do intermittent fasting all at the same go when you've just been eating whatever you want on no sort of schedule. Start with something small.
Yeah.
Start with meal prepping. Start with buying grapes instead of chips. Just start somewhere small. Because what happens is, so where I am now, what I consider to be healthy now is different from what I considered to be healthy even 5 months ago. So as you become healthier, you learn more. You learn more about what it means to be healthier, and you learn new ways to be healthier, and you figure out what makes you healthier. Because I love doing the raw vegan thing. I'm probably going to try doing fruitarian for a while. I'm very big about it. I really like it. It makes me feel really good. But I'm not trying to build any more muscle. I'm just trying to lean out. I'm kind of just trying to make eating into an easier habit for myself. For someone like you who's trying to, build muscle, really likes the heavy weightlifting, looking to constantly improve in that realm, fruitarian's probably not the way to go for you.
Right.
Because it's not a high protein diet. And not that it's about a high protein diet. It's all about balance and all that good stuff. But, so every version of healthy is not one size fit all. And so you're going to learn what fits you and also what fits you at the moment.
Exactly.
I want to be fruitarian right now. Doesn't mean I'm going to want to be fruitarian 3 months from now. Doesn't mean I'm going to want to be fruitarian 6 weeks from now. And that's okay. You don't have to commit. It's a lifestyle change, when you're trying to be healthy. So on the one hand, like, I don't want to say it's okay to constantly change, because like you need to find something that works and you need to stick with it and give it time to actually process. Just because you aren't seeing instant results doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that you're transitioning. But at the same time, once you do get into that niche where you're really finding what works for you, you don't have to feel like you have to classify yourself. Just because I said I was going raw vegan doesn't mean I can never eat a cooked meal again in my life. Just because I'm going fruitarian doesn't mean that I can never eat tofu again. Like, it just means that most of the time, that's the way that I'm going to try to eat, because I know it's good for my body and I know how it makes me feel. And I know what not eating that way and not sticking to that, how that will also make me feel. And for me, the payout of how I feel from eating healthy is just so much bigger than the payout I ever got from eating a bag of Cheetos and hanging out with my cat. So,
Well, and like you said, like this, we're still all on a journey to find ourselves. And I think trying all these different things is completely normal, and it should be done. And so you don't grow tired of something, But I do want to take it back to you committing. You made that commitment. Mm-hmm. We talked about how difficult it was. What did you implement to lose the weight? What did you try, and what kind of was your trial and error?
So, I mean, and I know I said a minute ago I didn't really have goals in the beginning, but you do have to have some sort of goal. So, again, like, I do credit my first roommate that I had with some things, because she wanted to run a 5K and she wanted to run it with me. She wanted me to run it with her. Mm-hmm. And she wouldn't let me off the hook about it because I didn't have a good reason not to go do this 5K. And so that was like that first goal, that I had paid for this 5K. My roommate was doing it. I had to be able to go and at least get through this race. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long it took me. I know I didn't run all of it. I know that I walked the majority of it.
But you completed it.
But I got it fucking done.
Yeah.
And so from there, even getting it done, even doing it by myself, because, she could run, and there was another friend that did it with her that they could run, and, like, they did the 5K the way that they should have. even just that little bit of being able to say that I did a 5K was enough to start making me feel better and starting to feel like I had made an accomplishment outside of work, because at that time the only thing I did was go to work, and so I didn't have any accomplishments or any friends outside of my job, because that was the only place I felt like I could be successful. So that's where I just put everything into, was my job. So that's how it started. I started to feel good, and then we signed up for another 5K, and I was like, okay, like I have to be able to run this one. This is my thing. I'm going to run this one. So I actually started doing like the green smoothies. Like that was the first really kind of healthy trend that I picked up on. Was I got the NutriBullet, and I would do, it was spinach, pineapple, flaxseed, and apple. And I would drink that. It tasted like candy to me. So I would drink that every single morning. And just implementing that started to make me feel better. And I'll never forget the first time, because there was a McDonald's on the way home. So I used to get McDonald's every single day after work. Like I said in the beginning, like I just went down to McDonald's one day a week. Then I got to the point I didn't eat it anymore. But one night I got super curious. So I was starting to feel a lot healthier. I got super curious, and I was like, man, I really remember how good that habanero ranch like quarter pounder tasted. And so I remember I went to McDonald's that night. I ordered that burger, and I ordered a large fry and a large drink, because that's what I used to eat all the time. One, as soon as I ate it, I could feel it in my body. Like I could feel it inside of my body. About. And two, like I could not eat all of that food. I couldn't. It was so much food, and it was so much just heavy food. I couldn't eat it. And at this point, I'm still over 300 pounds. It's not like I've, gone crazy over to the other side or anything like that yet. Like I was still very much in the very beginning of my fitness journey. And you start to realize, I started to realize that the food you eat has power. Food isn't just food. And that's something that doesn't click for a very long time. And I think a lot of people really don't understand. And again, that comes from the lack of nutrition education that is in our country. Is that your calories have power, and 1,200 calories of plants versus 1,200 calories of a burger are going to affect your body.
Right.
And so that's why you can't just count calories. So many people just counting calories or counting numbers or counting this. It is about a balance.
They need be the right calories.
They have to be the right calories. I can eat 1,200. I can eat 1,800 calories a day, 14 and 1,800. That's kind of where I hang out most of the time. I can eat that in one meal and not feel satisfied, and my body has a hard time processing it, and it's clogging my arteries and it's affecting me. Or I can literally eat, I think it's like 3 like mixing bowl sizes of salad, feel completely full, not feel heavy, and be able to do things. And you just don't realize. And everybody who's out there saying like, oh, but I don't like salad, I don't like this healthy food, blah, blah, blah. I didn't either.
Right.
I really didn't. I thought spinach was the worst thing on the planet. Kale and I are still having some disagreements, but I'm slowly like trying to give it another chance.
Yeah.
But you begin to start to have a taste for those things. Your body begins, because again, in the beginning, your body's craving all those things that were horrible for you. And so as you start to eat healthier, your body will start to crave the good things. And you just have to get through it. You have to get over that hump of, this is disgusting. And I guarantee there's food out there that is good for you that you will like. So it's finding those things you would like, trying different vegetables, trying different fruits. It looks weird, give it a shot. Give it a shot, look it up online, figure out how it's supposed to look and the texture it's supposed to be when it's ripe, because a lot of times we try new fruits and we eat it when it's not ripe, and so we're like, well, that was gross. Well, because you ate it at the wrong time, stupid. So, and I mean, I do this all the time. It's just, it's really about experimenting and trying new foods. Like we're all foodies. We all want to try new and different foods. So do that at the grocery store. Just go to the produce section. I've never seen this fruit before. Let me give it a try. Worst case scenario, you wasted $2. Like, it's all good.
Yeah. So did you run the next 5K completely?
So that actually, no. So I finally ran my first 5K 2 years ago, I did the Disney Princess 5K. And I not only ran that one, my goal was to run in under 30 minutes, and I did that.
That's awesome.
So the second 5K, I got derailed by something completely different, which I didn't actually see us talking about this, but it's just going to go. So I talked about emotional binge eating. And so a lot of times what happens, so when you're changing physically, if you don't change the mental underlying reasons of why you're overeating, why you're eating all the things that you're eating, you don't really fix yourself. What you do is you trade one addiction. For me, it was a food addiction for another addiction. Mm-hmm. And so I traded overeating for over drinking. And so my next 5K, I actually, instead of running that 5K, went and got drunk.
Oh, wow.
So I remember because my roommate was texting me, asking me like if I was coming. Because in the morning I'd given her, I knew I was going out. It was the World Cup. I was hanging out with some friends who had grown up in Colombia, and it was like a big party and all that stuff. And so I was going to watch the Colombia game and then go do the 5K because it was at night. It was a glow-in-the-dark 5K. I actually, like, looking back now, I'm really upset that I didn't go and do it because it probably was a lot of fun. But yeah, so instead I got there, and at this point, drinking had kind of taken a place in my life where it was my new way of numbing. It was my new way of dealing with my problems, and it was better than eating at McDonald's. Kind of, not really, but in my head it was at the time. Get our idea of healthy changes constantly. And
it's liquid calories. You can kind of like
you
throw
trick
that into
yourself.
the back. Yeah.
Well, and the thing with alcohol too is like you drink and then you like, I didn't really like eating. Well, that's a lie. Sometimes you don't like eating for a while, but then you eat horrible things a little bit later to try to feel better. But yeah, so that next 5K I actually ended up missing because I went out and got drunk instead. And, you know, like I said, even to now, I'm mad that I didn't go and run that 5K.
Yeah.
Because I wonder, and part of it was because I knew I wasn't still ready to run the whole thing. So I know that was a big piece of it, of just feeling embarrassed that I'd set a goal that I didn't reach, which is, you know, something that is also okay. Like, goals they're something that we set because we're trying to reach them. You might not always hit them, and sometimes some of the best goals and the goals that I've learned the most about myself is when I haven't quite made those goals, because I've still done so much work and I've made so much progress, and, you know, it doesn't, at the end of the day, like, the goal starts to matter less because you never really arrive in fitness or getting healthier. Like, there's always something more you can do to get healthier. And so the goals, they just kind of become something to help keep you in track, to help keep you in line, to make sure you're going in the right direction. So you have something to verify to yourself that you're still moving in the right direction. But it becomes less about the goal and just more about that lifestyle.
Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So later you become vegan though, right?
Yes.
And then you drop a pretty significant amount of weight, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I had 2 years where my body was changing. Like, I was wearing smaller sizes, everything like that, but I was seriously just 200 pounds, and I couldn't figure out how to change that. Because I was doing CrossFit, and at the time I didn't realize it. Now I realize, like, I was completely overtraining because I was doing CrossFit 1 to 2 times a day for, 10 to 11 days in a row. I was killing my body, and then I was just fueling it inappropriately with, alcohol and, just all of those, like the eggs and the milk and all of that stuff that we kind of naturally put into our food. And so I started my certification to become a yoga instructor, which is what I do now, what I've traded my corporate career in for. Which is
awesome. I just went to your one session this morning, and it was kick-ass. It was nothing like any of my other yoga classes I've ever been a part of. So it's super awesome.
Oh, that means a lot. But it's so yoga in the Western world, when we think of yoga, we think of the poses, the physical practice of yoga, but that is actually in many ways the most insignificant. It's a piece of it, so a piece of yoga, but it's still significant, but it's one of the most insignificant parts of yoga. It's more about the mental journey, and it's a lifestyle, a way of living. And so there are 8 different limbs, 8 different pieces to yoga. And the first piece is the yamas. And the yamas are kind of your code of conduct. They're the way you're supposed to live your life. And the most important yama, the one that outweighs all of the others, is ahimsa. And ahimsa is a non-violent lifestyle towards any living creature. So it's the idea that if you were attacking me, I could do what I needed to do to subdue you, but I couldn't take it farther than that.
Right.
You don't kill a spider because it's in your room. You don't eat animals because you don't have to.
Right.
So if I was trapped on a deserted island with only a pig to eat, yeah, you know what? I don't know how that's going to play out. But fortunately, I'm not trapped on a deserted island with only a pig to eat. There's plenty of other options.
That always comes up, that one thing. But
one thing.
if you were on an island.
Yeah, well, you know what? Once I'm on that island, I will write you a letter, let you know, look for my bottle in the ocean. But
that's a great way to respond to that. So you becoming a yoga instructor made you want to become
me go vegan.
That's so cool.
So like I said, I spent a long time being disconnected with who I was, and part of my thing was journeying to connect with who I was. And so becoming authentic, being truthful behind the things I was doing became very, very important to me. And when we were talking about ahimsa, I realized as a teacher, my rules for teachers are different from a student of yoga. If you're a student of yoga, then you're trying to move towards that way. Me as a teacher, I have to do my absolute best to embody those principles to the best of my ability. I'm not going to do it perfectly ever because I am a human. But there was no way I could continue to eat meat, that I could continue to support the dairy and the egg industries and not feel like and teach yoga authentically and not be a fraud.
Yeah.
And when I was journeying into yoga, I had hardcore imposter syndrome. Like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and I was so afraid someone would find out that I wasn't supposed to be there. I seriously had this fear my first weekend of teacher training. I don't even know if I've told them this, that at one point, Nick and Gianna, who own the studio that I trained at and teach at Shiva Yoga Shala, I was afraid that one day that first weekend, that they would just point at me and be like, you don't belong here. This is not what you're supposed to be here for. And so we're talking about ahimsa, and to really authentically be a yoga instructor, I could not make peace with continuing to support industries that I knew were causing not just a little bit of pain, it's a high scale amount of pain. We all know the things that are going on. It's not something that's behind in the dark anymore, and that we can say like, oh, I had no idea. So I couldn't authentically continue to eat meat and animal products and live in ahimsa.
No.
I would just constantly be violating that. And so how could I teach other people about this and not do it? And plus it would be pretty fucked up for me to be like, hey, yoga's been around for 2,000 years. I think it's all real cool, but I like burgers, so
Right.
I can't do this base main core principle. Like it is just not okay to me. And
Right.
so after that first teacher training weekend, which was coming up on that year mark.
That's amazing.
In April, I went vegan, and to the extent of I've never purposely violated being vegan since then, which again is not a standard that people need to hold themselves to, but
Right.
for me, like I said, it was a very moral
It's important.
issue.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and so that led you from becoming to being vegan, and now shoot you almost a year later, you've hit that mark where you're hit 150 pounds, which is absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you have created such an awesome image for yourself, and it's like the past 5 years has been such a journey for you, and you've created such an amazing amazing story.
Yeah.
And so many people can take so much from that. And so I just have like two quick questions to ask you. And the first one is, for people that were in your shoes when you first were getting started, what advice would you give them to start their journey?
Start somewhere.
Yeah.
And that sounds so
Cliche. Yeah.
and so broad. But it really is just about making one small change. For me, it started with just committing to taking a mile walk after work. That's where I started. It really wasn't any sort of big thing. I didn't get into a gym for the first time until 3 years after I had started this journey. You know, just start small. Start with something you can handle, whether that's an at-home workout DVD, whether that is going for a walk, whether that is, you know, just simply meal prepping so your food is ready to go so you aren't as tempted. Because especially in the beginning, guys, the beginning is amazing because even though it's hard, you're constantly seeing results. You're constantly seeing changes. You're constantly feeling better. People are constantly noticing the differences you're making for yourself. So the beginning is hard, but appreciate every moment of it, because later you get to the point where you're like, I have been doing everything right for a week and I somehow gained half a pound.
Yeah.
And you have to look at all these different things and be like, okay, like it's not a big deal, and reassure yourself. But in the beginning, things will change so much and you will start to get addicted to seeing those changes.
Right.
So
That's awesome.
Just start.
Take that step forward and implement.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect answer, even though as cliche as it is,
As it sounds.
like that is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Which is, and I love you saying it, because I know a lot of people have or are currently in your position that you were in. So
And if
it's
you're
just
looking for a specific, if you're looking for what I would specifically do to start, drink more water, go for a mile walk. Drink more water, walk a mile a day.
yeah,
Because water is very easy to control. Stop drinking soda, stop drinking the extra things. Even if you start by doing like the additives, like the Mios and stuff in your water, that's still going to be healthier for you than your sugary sports drinks or anything like that. So start by just drinking more water, walking a mile a day. It's 15 to 20 minutes. You can do it in the afternoon, after work, do it first thing in the morning, figure out what works for you. But those would be the two things to actually get started. If you want a specific, I seriously don't know what to do, where do I start? That is where you start.
that's amazing. Great advice. So my final question for you is, you've gained all this knowledge along your journey, right? And you've learned so much about yourself. You've made certain like plan of actions for certain situations, and to get yourself continuously progressing. And then thankfully we were able to help you along your journey in our Vegan Gains Academy. And this was obviously towards the end of like the past few months. And what I think is awesome is like you've learned so much about yourself, but you were able to realize that you needed a little bit more guidance. And so I just want to ask you, like, what was the one principle that you took from our academy that was like an aha to you, realizing like I needed this, I could have used this 5 years ago?
You don't have to do it alone.
Boom. That is...
Don't have to. It's okay
Yes.
to need support. It's okay to need help. And it's actually been proven. I've been reading a lot of studies recently, and they found that even bigger than making those health changes, even bigger than changing your diet or getting exercise, people who are able to build strong communities and have strong connections have better, longer lives.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel like I had that. I was going through a hard time. I felt very alone. I almost didn't even do the initial vegan fitness challenge.
I'm so glad that you did.
You guys had technical problems the first day, or I wouldn't have done it. And then I happened to go in on the second day. I was like, oh, it's day 2. I already missed day 1, but whatever. I have nothing better to do. I'll check
I actually
this
never
out.
told Leif that.
Yeah, that's why the technical problems happened. I'm sorry, but that's why it happened. So there's a lot of things came together, and then, speaking with you, and just even before that, listening to you guys talk through the podcast and through your live stream, and following you guys on Instagram, and actually paying attention to what you guys were saying, what you said, and what I believed and I was trying to teach were so in sync and so in line. And it was like I had written some of the posts myself, and
That's amazing.
I was like, and it was that moment of realization too that a lot of people struggle to find. Just because you're working to help other people, just because you're supporting other people, doesn't mean you don't need support yourself. And
Yes.
so for a while there, I was like, well, how, as a professional who's currently, who I run a program to try to help people get into shape, how can I be taking a program to get in shape?
Right.
And then I realized, well,
Then you realize, like, oh, I should be progressing myself, and
Yeah.
I should be finding help, and I should be surrounding myself with people that are helping bring me up more.
yeah. And so if I want to get better at what I'm doing, I have to get better. I
Yeah.
can't just stay where I am and not make any changes. Nobody wants a trainer who's,
Right.
hasn't still with lifting the same weights they were 2 years ago. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to see that progression forward. So to think that I couldn't work on myself because I was trying to help other people work on them was just very naive.
Yeah,
So that was the biggest thing. And
that's amazing.
it was such a good fit, and it was exactly what I needed when I needed it. And I was just so grateful that I found you guys, and I'm just very grateful for all of the help and support you guys have been, through the academy and after the academy.
Tearing up.
A little bit. I'm trying to not, but it's just
Yeah. No, it has been so phenomenal to get to know you, and now I traveled from Pennsylvania down to
To come
Florida
here.
to see you and work out with you, which was a brutal
Oh my
workout.
God, I'm
I don't think I
so-
ever want to climb another rope in my entire life.
No. All set.
But I think that is very powerful, is a source of accountability. I feel like, well, like you said, we find great value in that, and we surround ourselves with like-minded people too.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you so much for being so awesome
Thank
and
you.
creating such an awesome image for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And also thank you for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
You're going to touch lives, and I can't wait to let you know all about it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
It's
of course.
been amazing.
So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It was truly amazing to meet her in person, and I'm so glad that I'm able to bring her story on this podcast to you guys. I hope you are inspired to take action just like she has and create such an amazing self-image and reach a place of happiness just like she has. So if you would like more information about our one-on-one coaching, you can visit vegansuperheroacademy.com for more client testimonials and a little bit more information about what we're all about. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and hope you have a fantastic week. We'll catch you in the next episode.